it's been since March that I wanted to get you on the show to discuss, to break down not just obviously your incredible can I call it a debate? Your incredible discussion with Mayor Eric Adams on the Breakfast Club in March, but then also just talk to you more broadly about what is going on with the crime narrative really that's taken a hold of the country, but specifically focused on New York. But let's talk about your interview. If people haven't watched it, I would encourage everyone to go to Olay's YouTube channel, Olurin on YouTube, because Olay breaks it down. And it's so good, and with like the supporting documents and everything. But I have 3 clips that I really liked that I wanted to like just ask you about, because I thought they hit on different aspects. And the first one is about really talking about the root causes of crime, right? Like, which never really gets talked about.
Yes.
And how when he came into the mayor's office, it was off the back of the pandemic. The pandemic's still going on. And everything that came along with that. So here he's spitting some crap stat at you, and here you are pushing back on that. And I just wanted you to expand. So take a look.
The federal monitor was.
Never mind. Here we go.
Because when I came to this city, we had a 40% increase in crime, and most of that crime, Black and brown communities.
You became mayor after a global pandemic in which there was record unemployment, business loss, homelessness, and you're not drawing that connection to it. You're making no. But what I'm saying is crime is connected to what is happening in the city and the experiences of people. This is the most expensive city in the world. We had a global pandemic where businesses closed and people were out of work. So if you saw crime, it was connected to that.
But you're saying also private sector jobs. Come on.
Also, you're saying that you've turned it around, NYPD's abuses. But just last year, we paid out $150 million in settling police misconduct from NYPD, and that was double the number. That's double the number in police misconduct since you became mayor.
I noticed something.
Okay, so he's like turning around. I noticed something else. You pivot that a little bit into, like obviously the massive amount of money that New York has to pay out because of the NYPD's misconduct, but you really focus it on like trying to, and he agrees with you. He's like, I know, yes, and unemployment.
He agrees with me when he thinks it's going to be an excuse for why he hasn't done it, right? He like latches onto it. I want to be clear, like before that clip even happens, what he's actually doing is being like, we turned this city around. We turned this city around. It's amazing. Da, 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 da. And then once I'm like, no, you didn't. Like, look at all these bad, like all this. And he's like, oh, I inherited a disaster, blah, 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 right? Like I've only been, and I always think that's funny because like a friend of mine made the point, I didn't even say it in that interview, but like he's more than halfway through his term. He's more than halfway through his term, literally almost done, and he's talking like he just got there. Like, oh, give me a second. Like, what would I evaluate your tenure as mayor by other than what you did as mayor?
Like, right. Absolutely. Okay. No, well, and he contradicts himself a lot in your interview with him and your discussion with him. He contradicts himself on like whether or not subways are safe. Yes, no, whether or not crime, whether it's like it's going up or people should be afraid, they shouldn't be afraid. He contradicts himself about programs at Rikers prison, whether they're good, bad, whether he cut them. Like he
was like, oh, I did all these programs. I was like, that's not true. You cut the programs. And he was like, programs are bad. These people want to get.
Exactly.
He's like, literally they wanted to pay their money. He was like, if they cared about people, why would they don't want to do this for free, brother?
Exactly. He flips it on you a million times. But I did like that moment because it showed that beyond like these temporary fix-its, which the cops really are when it comes to our actual public safety, you're looking at maybe some of the reasons that there was a little bit of a spike in crime in terms of like the joblessness and homelessness and all this. And like you try to kind of get through to him. And I feel like we still do not get through to people about these root causes. And a lot of folks are like, yeah. But it's like, no. When people can't live indoors, they have to be outside, and also they're not harming anybody except maybe themselves. They're at the whim of, of other violence. So I really appreciated that. I also wanted to move into, I guess maybe this part where you talk about how he spreads a lot of rhetoric around crime in New York, and that he is basically in lockstep around fomenting some of this fear.
Yeah.
And which again, he's trying to have it both ways, because through this interview, he's like, I turned around, everything's good. But also, people are scared, it's bad. And you're like, well, which is it? What do you mean? Is it good or bad? Or you fix it or not?
Safe or not safe?
Safe or not safe? And then you specifically note how the NYPD, and I'd like you to expand on this, is spreading this rhetoric itself and then wiping their own crimes under the rug. Like just a day before this interview, killing a 19-year-old in Queens whose mother was begging them not to shoot. Take a look.
NYPD on their own Twitter pages that are posting and sensationalizing crime. And I said this at the beginning. You said that there's a difference between perception and reality, how people feel afraid versus how safe New York actually is. And I agree with you, but I said that it's your own rhetoric and NYPD's rhetoric that plays into that. And you did it just now, because the reality is a condition of release for everybody, for every crime, whether it be non-bail eligible or bail eligible, is that if you commit a crime and you're rearrested, that you bail can and will be set on you. So that's the first thing. Second of all, they have conducted multiple studies, but the Brennan Center literally just put out one. Less than 2% of anybody in New York City that's released on bail is rearrested for any violent crime. More importantly, in the same breath that you want to sensationalize, we want to highlight and point out, an officer was killed the other day, which is a rare occurrence across the United States, but let alone in New York. New York police officers have killed at least 7 people this year, including a 19-year-old. An NYPD officer killed a 19-year-old in Queens yesterday.
I'm not going to dismiss the loss of a life of an innocent person that wears a uniform to protect us.
But you do, of the 31 people dead at Rikers and the 19-year-old killed yesterday.
I love how he's engaging in this a little bit, like, do you condemn Hamas? Like in terms of like valuing life, right? There's a little bit of a like, well, I cannot move past this police officer who was, killed in the line of duty. And it's almost like he's reacting to the fact that you didn't stop and say, may he rest in peace, like something like this, right?
It's a dog whistle. It's like a dog whistle, right? He immediately goes, I don't want to be taking you out of context, sister, as though you don't value this police officer. It's a very clear, like literally bat signal in the sky. And it's very obvious that that's what he was doing then. That's why I said that's not going to work on me, Mayor. And immediately after that interview ends, he runs to New York Post and Fox News to like make that same argument that I don't value this officer. The problem with a person like Eric Adams and dealing, I think in that conversation, in that moment we were having, is Eric Adams doesn't care anything about power and being reelected. That's all he cares about. He could care less about people. He could care less about like the constituents. So he's not answerable to them. So he thinks dealing with someone like me, I'm not a politician. I'm not running for office, and I'm never going to run for office. So I have no desire to see him pro-police. That's only effective if I were a politician in the middle of a re-election campaign. Then I'd feel like, oh my God, God forbid you shine this dog whistle to make these people have the argument that I'm not like pro-police, or I'm not willing to like value this police officer's life over all of the people that are dying pre-trial, over all of the people that NYPD are killing, over all of the people that NYPD are brutalizing. And I don't I'm totally fine with that. You cannot tell me that you don't care. You have nothing to say. He literally never acknowledged Wynn Rosario, which was the name of the 19-year-old that was killed by NYPD the night before. And luckily, I will say the family did reach out to the family told Elio Cruz, I think, who let me know that they were like, they really appreciated me bringing it up, because they think otherwise Mayor Adams would have never ever acknowledged it, even after the body footage came out and it was horrific. So yeah, he's a snake, right? And I just think it's beautiful that people get to see it. I think they get to see in real time how he is, like, just
well, the fact that he had to go to the New York Post and other media outlets and freak out about this one moment that you weren't even slipping like at all, just shows you how much you handed his ass to him in this interview. And a lot of people reported on that. But I did want to ask about, like, for people who don't know, the NYPD and Mayor Eric Adams broadly, in terms of like ratcheting up unfounded fear about crime. What has that looked like for residents there? And what is, I know it has meant many police officers in the subway systems, which actually Charlemagne in the beginning of this interview said very candidly, when people see that, they think something's wrong, even though there might not be. And he's like, it seems like it's a bad thing. It makes people feel like, what's going on? This is, is this not safe?
And he just kept, and I thought it was, what I think is interesting, right, is like when a person like me, who's a Black person who lives in this city, says the same thing, it gets dismissed to like, oh, those are the leftist radicals, and you just have a difference of opinion. But here is a Charlemagne who by no means is a leftist or where I'm from or anything. These people in the room, Envy is pro police, like explicitly pro police. I think his father might be a cop. Charlemagne is definitely not on my side of the aisle, and they're both saying the same thing, right? So even your average, not half as informed, not a leftist, not a progressive, not a radical, sees, can have common sense wise, sees and says the same thing. And that's what I said. New Yorkers do not feel safe by this overinflation of police presence. And that's an important point, because he specifically said his own argument was that New York is safe, is that we have the safest subways, is that there are, he called a number, like a negligible amount of number of incidents that had happened on the subway. And he said, think about this. In the city where they are defunding education, they are defunding housing, they're defunding healthcare, and they keep telling you, and Eric Adams is all around the place telling people to justify budget cuts that he's been making for our social benefits that he's been making since the minute he became mayor, to justify those budget cuts that he already was going to make, and he keeps making. He says that it's because of the migrants, right? That we don't have any money for any of our social welfare, so that people, marginalized people that he's not serving, can turn their ire at migrants, at more marginalized people, right? He says that it's because the money's being spent on migrants. But why is it that you're, by your own admission, Mayor Adams, you're telling us that we don't need these police, that these police are just here because there is a perception of fear? So you are spending money that apparently you do not have to give us for education that we actually need, for healthcare that we actually need, for housing that we actually need, for libraries, for parks that we actually need. But you're telling me that you're using it for the appearance of safety, when here are Black New Yorkers in the room, other Black people telling you it makes no one feel safer. So what you're telling me is you are wasting our fucking money on bullshit for your boys in blue. That's what you're telling me.
I feel like maybe that was the one thing you left on the table, even though you literally did everything in that interview. But I think that's really important to say, is that no, he wants to pay for the illusion that something is being done when it's actually unnecessary. Again, this is not actually helping anybody. You and even in that interview, I think it was Head Start programs that have been cut, and other like early childhood education programs that have been cut for New York City. Let's talk about that migrant stuff, right? Where does Eric Adams fit on this? Because it feels like he is. It's not that he's susceptible to the right wing argument. I think he is a right winger, so he's using. Right. So he's using the influx of migrants from countries like Venezuela or Haiti as a way to, like you're saying, funnel money out of public services only, like education, healthcare, whatever, housing, and into the cops. But what else is going on that we need to know here? Like what, he says he's been lobbying DC and Biden and do something about this. And obviously Biden's answered the call, because now I guess seeking asylum is illegal. So, as it was under Trump. But maybe just give us a sense about like, how does his like bullshit tough on crime stuff, like, how does that dovetail with the migrants? I mean, it feels like he's playing people off each other.
He's just so full of shit. It's just like he's so full of shit. And it's unfortunate, right? Because it's hard for people to believe that their elected officials and people that they've given power just sit there and tell them outright lies. But that's what he's doing. That is all that he's doing. And the problem is people can't recognize when they have two devils, right? Like what Eric Adams did. And he did it in that interview, and he does it a lot. He will point to a Greg Abbott. He'll be like Greg Abbott, a name that people know as wicked towards migrants, and people, which he is. He's a fucking wicked demon. And so is Eric Adams. Just because the demons aren't friends with each other does not make them not demons, right? So, so what he does is he says to Black people, like, it's intentional. If you notice, it's important to me to analyze how Eric Adams talks depending on where he is. But he gets on that Black outlet. Whenever you hear him talking about migrants, it's just outright fuck the migrants, this, and the next thing, right? And it's, they're coming from these countries. It's all these dog whistles about danger. But originally, before I pushed him, he started out his discussion of migrants on that interview by basically trying to be like, to say that other people like Greg Abbott are demonizing these migrants from these areas.
He's doing the Gavin Newsom thing.
And he proceeds to end up, I end up talking him into doing the same thing in the interview that he always does, right? But he will say to Black people, he will have Black people believe, and the argument that he made, because Black people are susceptible to this, is by saying, Oh, Greg Abbott, they're going after all the black politicians. They're going after all the black mayors. They're trying to make the black mayors look bad. So he's sending this guy that we know is a white right-wing racist is sending all these migrants here and all this media attention to. And so black people who know it is true that black people are criticized or that black people in power. And so black people who are not as familiar with what Eric Adams is doing policy-wise, they're not familiar with what he's saying when he's not on the black outlets, when he's talking to the white people. And so they think, oh, damn, that's what's happening. When in reality, Greg Abbott hates migrants, and so does Eric Adams. Greg Abbott don't like black people, and neither does Eric Adams, right? Like they have different problems, different places. So that's what's going on there.
Yes, no, I mean, a tale as old as time, right? It's just like playing the kind of like, the sort of almost, the uninformed voter who just like cursorily knows, Greg Abbott worse.
Yeah.
Right. Ron DeSantis worse. But he's simultaneously like he's trying to get rid of migrants as fast as he can. And I think also kind of making the same mistake that Biden does.
I don't believe, and first of all, I don't believe that Eric Adams wants to get rid of the migrants. I don't believe it anyone.
Oh,
the migrants are no. I don't think so at all. I think the migrants are a beautiful fall. They're fall guys. Like that's what the migrants are, right? I want to be clear. America has this way of convincing Americans that the same problem Americans know they've been dealing with since every day is now a new problem because they've named it something new. America is a country that advertises itself to the entire rest of the world as a melting pot. This New York City is a city filled with people of migrant background immigrants. We're talking to one right here, like I live in Little Haiti. I live in Little Caribbean. Most of New Yorkers are literally from all over the world, right? Like only suddenly, isn't it interesting that we get this right-wing
suddenly everyone's talking about migrants.
Suddenly we have a fucking migrant crisis. Ooh, big crisis. It's the same way I just did a Greg Abbott expose on my channel, right? It's the same way Greg Abbott talks about the border, the situation at the border, like it's this new out of control issue. But I put his letter, what he's saying about the migrants at the border, right next to the secession letters, and they're saying the same shit. Nothing is new. Every problem that they claim they have, the migrant crisis, the crime, this, all of these are just like names they've come up for how they will disparage different marginalized groups, and they convince and they pit those groups against each other, right? It's easy. So you get an Eric Adams, someone who is a fucking cop. He is a cop. He is a former registered Republican. He only became a registered Democrat in order to become to go into politics, right? So you've got a cop mayor who is anti-black in so many ways that I have actually articulated for you. I encourage everybody to watch my Eric Adams expose. And then everybody goes, oh, hey, I'm not doing things. Don't mind. You don't need to hear about all the people I'm letting die pre-trial. You don't need to hear about all the money that I'm cutting, and you don't need to hear about all the stop and frisk that I put in place. You don't need to hear about all these dangerous units that I put in black and brown neighborhoods to brutalize them. Instead, you should feel upset that the resources that you're not getting because I cut them and stuff like that. No, don't be mad at me. Be mad at these migrants. That's the problem. Hate these other people who don't have shit because they're the reason you're not getting the things that I wasn't giving you. And people don't stop to sit down and say to themselves, hey, how come they're not saying that because of the migrant crisis, NYPD doesn't get new billions more dollars, right? But the literal same time that Eric Adams is telling everybody in New York that they can't get money for education and healthcare and housing and all these things because of the migrants, he signed, by his own admission, a historic landmark deal to give billions more dollars to NYPD. NYPD has not lost a dollar since Eric Adams became mayor, but somehow the rest of us have. But it's the migrants' fault. It's the migrants' fault, sure.
No, I mean, it's wild. I mean, he's a Republican, and this is that's the other thing. And I don't mean to again, you see the way Biden is allowing the right to paint the narrative for him when it comes to the migrant crisis at the border. But Eric Adams, I think, is a I think he's actually sort of much more of a Republican because he's 100%. No, it's good. It's good for divide and conquer tactics. And to keep that fear going. And obviously the cops are not without consequences. These are not just, and you point that out to him. This is the very last clip I just wanted to play from it, which, I think is great. And oh my God, if this touched a nerve with him, he could not let go. And you guys talked about it. I mean, he kept going back to it for I think 20 minutes. It's about the federal monitor. It's about stop and frisk and the expansion of stop and frisk and the worsening of it. So he can't even let you finish.
Because Bobby couldn't let me finish because he didn't want Black people to hear that. There is no defense to it. There's nothing you can say to Black people. So what he does is he conceals that information from them. He can't get it out because he doesn't want to hear it, which is the reason why I wanted to notice ever since that interview, Eric Adams, not only did he go on that silly little press run and all those different things, but have you noticed now he's limited how many people can even come to his pressers. He's freezing journalists out because he knows, again, he can never answer the questions. It's all about, which is a right-wing tactic to just suppress information. They never
he's obviously, his PR person has been fired ever since agreeing to do this interview with you present. I mean, I am floored.
They were behind me. I could see them all, the three of them. He had three his guys on his team. They were sitting behind me, like off to the side. It was a white guy, a Latino guy, and a Black guy. The Latino guy was chilling. The Black guy was like this. And the white guy was literally like this. And he just kept like trying to round up the interview like a million times. Like 3 times, just like,
right. We gotta go. But he couldn't let it go. He couldn't let it go. He was so defensive, which made him look even weaker on it. And you let him speak. I will give you, like, I think there was moments where you're just like, honestly, there's so much bullshit coming out of his mouth. I'm just gonna let him like go.
Honestly, it's best. Like I for me, it was Eric Adams, and despite what, you know, the people who just want to be against me and like to say, Eric Adams talks for the majority runtime of that interview. I let him talk, because I think it's important for people to hear him. Like a lot of sometimes, you know, what they say to us in court when becoming lawyers is like, the best thing to know is to know when not to speak, or to let these people say, like, let them answer. The answer is worse. Like, you ever seen a witness? If a witness on the stand is falling apart, or like, you know, showing themselves to not have a great character, whatever, that's what you want to happen. There's no reason for me to cut off his tirade, because it's important for y'all to see how this man is doing everything he can to dance around the fucking point, to avoid it. Like, all that's beautiful. Like, my mommy was so upset. My parents were so upset about the sexism of it all. I was like, that is wonderful. Like, that is amazing. Like, see it on display. Does it get, like, it's so much easier to show you something than it is to explain it to you. So for me, it's like beautiful. You get to see. And
you stopped down and were like, Exhibit A, he just said he wasn't fear mongering, got really mad when I said he was fear mongering, and then fear mongered. Right. Like, and it was beautiful. But here's what really got him.
The federal monitor, who is tasked with ensuring that NYPD is following the law, conducted an analysis. Conducted an analysis that happened 8 years ago, but they're still here monitoring what you're doing. And they said that you have brought back stop and frisk policies that are worse than they saw even during the Bloomberg era. But more importantly, they analyzed the neighborhood safe.
Show me that.
I could show you the report is available, and I know it's been available to you because your spokesperson has commented on it. They did an analysis of over 10 precincts, 10 different precincts. That is factual. There's a federal monitor reporting to Judge T. Swain on it and presenting the information. They said that, yes, listen, let me finish so you can peel it back. They conducted an analysis of 10 different precincts, and of the stops of 10 different precincts, they found that 97% of them, by the way, of the neighborhood safety teams that were disbanded in 2020 because of their disproportionate abuse against Black and Hispanic people that you revived, they analyzed 10 of those different neighborhood safety teams and found that they're conducting 97% of their stops on Black and brown people, and a quarter of them are unconstitutional. That's what the federal monitor said, not me.
And then he, first of all, peel it back is a phrase he starts using initially, like, you know, oh, I'm going to peel it back. And then he shuts up when you were like, listen, and then you can peel it back if that's your favorite thing to do. Right. And then he has to like sit there and listen to you like saying it. So, I mean, this is the other thing that, like, you know, even Trump has this perception that New York is crime-ridden, right? When he himself got his felony convictions, he immediately starts like, you know, brain melty babbling.
They don't have that perception. They say that these are all dog whistles because these are urban cities. These are cities where people like me live. They don't have that perception because, you know what's funny? Half of these politicians and pundits that are always telling you, that always seem to want to fearmonger about New York, LA, all these liberal, you know what all those cities have in common? They have Black people and them. They live in those fucking cities. Right. All over the goddamn place. So it's like they say that nonsense, but they don't believe it. And you know they don't believe it because in their lived experiences, they live there. And then in our statistical experience, New York City is safer than half of these rural, these Republican areas and all these red states per capita. There's way more crime and things that happen there.
I think it's like Louisville, isn't Isn't like Louisville got like horrible murder rates? I don't know. I'm sorry,
Listen.
Louisville, if I'm doing you wrong
If you're
here, but like
slaughtering Louisville.
right, but it is not New York or LA or these like so-called blue cities, but you're absolutely right. And it's across the board. It's Republican, it's Democrat. It's mostly homeowners
Yeah.
who think that the worst thing about like homelessness, for example, is that they have to see it. And we've talked about or that homelessness is a natural indicator of crime, even though it's
But
not.
I wish we would listen. Honestly, I really, truly wish we would listen less to these people.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do it.